This might be the best story ever told in a game, and I think it simply wouldn't work in any other visual medium. My name is Groudon, I am on an impossible journey to review every Steam game in alphabetical order, and today we're finally playing 1000 Times Resist. Let's begin. In a world where games with incredibly well-told stories like The Last of Us, Red Dead Redemption, and Firewatch already exist, it's not exactly easy to stand out from the crowd of games with award-winning narratives. You need to be able to tell a captivating story with high stakes and risks, yet also have smaller, quieter, emotional moments that feel grounded in humanity, characters that the player can connect with, relate to, and care about, a world that feels believable, and pacing that keeps the player invested in the story from one moment to the next, from plot point to plot point. You need to explore experiences that are relevant in the moment to the characters in the story, yet also resonate with the player to allow them to reflect on their own lives and the hardships they've overcome. 1000 Times Resist nails this, and throws in a brilliant soundtrack and excellent voice acting for good measure just because they could. And I'll be honest, I'm not sure I'm knowledgeable or articulate enough to do this game justice in this review, but I'm going to give it a darn good go. Developed by Sunset Visitor, published by Fellow Traveller, and released on Steam on the 10th of May 2024, 1000 Times Resist is one of the rare games we get to feature that has already performed well, accumulating over 3,500 reviews and attaining an overwhelmingly positive review status. This meant that while I went into the game blind from a story perspective, I'd managed to avoid any and all media relating to it somehow. I did therefore have some expectations about it, and I'll admit that I was initially somewhat underwhelmed. And kind of weirdly, that became part of why I ended up not just enjoying the game, but getting actively invested in it. Now, fair warning, not only does the game feature some potentially triggering themes that you'll see on screen now, but as it's a very story-focused game, it's all but impossible to discuss it without spoiling at least some of the early game moments. If you just want to hear my summarized and generally spoiler-free thoughts on the game, skip ahead to the timecode on screen now. For everyone else, let's get into it. Set in the not-too-distant future, 1000 Times Resist is a story about a high school girl, an alien invasion, a deadly disease, a precious gift, time traveling through memories, racial discrimination, riots, terrorism, a society of clones, and cake. There is a mother, a father, a daughter, and a best friend. There is a star, and a dangerous gravity. It's a third-person, yet sometimes first-person, narrative-focused, side-scrolling 3D exploration visual novel platformer with heavy emphasis on world-building, character development, and some of the best plot twists I've seen in recent years. You play as Watcher, one of 5 sisters that help to run the Orchard, a safe haven where clones of the All-Mother live until they're eventually sent to join the All-Mother in the fight against the Occupants, a mysterious alien race that brought a dreadful disease with them when they arrived on Earth many years ago. Humanity is long gone, and the All-Mother and her clones are all that remain, locked into a seemingly endless struggle to survive. The game begins, as all good games tend to, with a main menu. The black background is ominous, but the settings themselves are actually pretty comprehensive. You've got some gameplay options to switch between hold and toggles for various actions, separate sound sliders with an extra option to turn off high-pitched ringing sounds, camera sensitivity and inversion options, and some basic graphical settings including resolution, VSync, and shadows. Sunset Visitor gets bonus points for the accessibility options, but loses a few for not having rebindable controls, as well as missing texture, view distance, and particle effects settings, but not many points, because the game isn't particularly graphically intensive. That said, even with my 5070 Ti, I experienced some stuttering when moving between sections in the main hub area. Overall, it's an A- tier settings menu. The game does also include a prompt to remind you that the best way to play is with a controller, which is perfect because today's sponsor is the Manba 1v2 wireless controller. Now, heads up, this isn't an ad read, this is a mini review. This controller actually came at the perfect time because if you're familiar with my channel, especially my live streams, you'll know that my go-to controller of choice is the PlayStation DualSense, but I'm constantly annoyed by the lack of PlayStation controller glyphs in games. Getting set up with the Mamba 1 was delightfully simple, just plug in the USB receiver and away you go. You can also use Bluetooth mode to connect to other devices like a Switch or even your phone if that's your jam. You'll get around 10 hours of gaming on a single charge, and the controller also comes with a docking station for charging when you're done. The Mamba 1 feels good to use. It's solid and weighty, not plasticky at all, and just a little bit heavier than the PlayStation DualSense controller. There's a few key tech differences though that actually put it a step above. The first are the Hall effect joysticks and 800Hz polling rate that result in snappy and responsive controls that would take much longer to result in any kind of stick drift due to continuous use or wear and tear. Secondly, and most obviously, there's the LCD panel in the center of the controller. This screen is navigated using the buttons at the bottom of the center of the controller, not with a touchscreen, so there's no risk of bumping or changing things by accident while gaming. This screen allows you to change the modes of the joysticks, set up macros for the 4 customizable back panel triggers, and adjust the lighting effects. If customizable LEDs aren't enough for you, the faceplate is also magnetic and can be swapped out for another quickly and easily. Overall, I only have a few minor complaints about the controller. Firstly, the switches for changing the L and R triggers linear effects are in slightly uncomfortable positions that could press into your fingers depending on your grip style. Secondly, I am personally not a fan of the clickiness of the face buttons. I prefer softer, quieter presses so they don't pick up on my mic when recording. Thirdly, I'd love Razer integration with Razer Synapse lighting controls so that I can have all my LEDs in sync. And lastly, I wish they had more faceplate designs to swap to for more customization. The Mamba 1 version 2 is also very reasonably priced, coming in at $69.99 US, meaning my final rating is a solid Hall effect out of 10. You won't be stick drifting away from this controller once it's in your hands. So, if you're interested in elevating your PC controller gaming experience, make sure to check the links in the description below. So, with controller in hand, let's get back to 1000 Times Resist, where the story begins with a short cutscene where a character in blue, looking rather angry about something, runs up behind a woman in black called Iris, who appears to be deep in prayer, and promptly stabs her in the back. There's no build-up, no context, nothing. But boy does it work well to grab your attention and wonder what the heck is going on. Which is a good thing, because you'll be wondering that for a while, and a bad thing, because you'll be wondering that for a while. Similar to other media that utilizes time travel as a plot device, there will always be scenes with deeper or hidden meanings that only become apparent during subsequent playthroughs, and 1000 Times Resist starts this from the very beginning. Our stab-happy heroine is Watcher, and while we have little context for their actions, we know there is a powerful purpose behind it, given her next words to Iris. "You stole our immunity. You condemned us to this life. Why do you get to choose who lives and who dies?" A glitching figure appears behind her, the title screen appears, and after a brief dreamlike scene, we find ourselves in the garden. We have little context for what is happening at the moment, so let me give a little without spoiling things. In this opening section, we meet Watcher's fellow sisters in the garden: Noah, Healer, Bang Bang Fire, and Fixer. In fact, we'll be heading below ground into the train station beneath the garden to say our farewells to Fixer, as she's been chosen to go and support the All-Mother in her fight against the occupants. It's an emotional moment and establishes the relationships between Watcher and these 4 key characters, and the unique love and responsibility they share. You'll also notice a floating robot assistant called Secretary. They serve a dual purpose as both delivering exposition, information and context, and also as part of the game's UI to show objects or characters that you can interact with and have targeted. From a mechanical standpoint, this serves as a tutorial to introduce the fundamentals of the game that you'll be doing for 90% of your playthrough, walking around and talking to people. Thankfully, as mentioned before, the voice acting is fantastic. And while it doesn't make a lot of sense considering that all the characters we're meeting here are clones of Iris and should have the same voice, I appreciate that they don't, as it lends greater personality and importance to them. Visually, honestly, visually the game is a bit rough. The characters and environments are decent enough, and some areas use lighting effects and sightlines extremely well, but it's not particularly high fidelity and there are often clashing textures. As we run down into these train station tunnels, you'll start to see what I mean, where in isolation each texture is fine, but when combined as a whole it doesn't quite feel cohesive. Like, some things are shiny but others are rough, some are flat, some are 3D. I think this is also partly due to a lack of shadows in these spaces. It was never bad enough to be offensive, but it definitely breaks immersion. And it's strange, because in some areas, everything looks incredibly well thought out and honestly quite beautiful. Considering that the garden serves as a main hub that you'll be spending a lot of time in, I would have thought that more care would have been taken, but perhaps it's all intentional at the end of the day and I'm just lacking the media literacy to understand why. After some cryptic words from Fixer, we say our goodbyes and start the first actual chapter where we begin a communion with Principal, the leader of the garden. This is essentially our special power we're gifted with as Watcher. With the help of Secretary, we're able to dive into and relive the memories of Iris the All-Mother to better understand her and her actions, to observe and retell her history, and to look for clues that may help us in the fight against the occupants. Our first stop, and possibly first exposure to human society, is through a visit to Iris's high school where we're guided by Principal. While exploring, you'll uncover bits and pieces of information that help you gather clues as to what happened and learn something quite important. You can only explore what Iris herself experienced and nothing more. Heading up to the rooftop, we have our first encounter with an occupant, characterized by their ominous red, glowing, giant humanoid figures. Each of them are headless, and in their place is a halo-like structure. And it is here that we find a shrine dedicated to Zhao, Iris's childhood best friend. This unlocks your ability to travel through memories in time, skipping forwards or backwards with the right and left bumpers, and the current date is shown in the bottom left of the screen. While this ability might sound incredibly freeform, the reality is that its use is still fairly linear. You're only able to jump between specific points in time, and these often need to be unlocked through progression, meaning that as a player you're simply moving through scenes rather than fully utilizing the time travel abilities to solve problems. I do feel that it wasn't used to its full potential, but I also think it's not the point of the game. It was never here to be a time-traveling puzzle game. Instead, your abilities serve as a narrative device, allowing the devs to serve snapshots of specific moments in time, often leaving you as the player to interpret what may have occurred between two events. You often see the before and the after, but not the between, the cause and the effect, but not the catalyst. Here, jumping back in time allows us to explore the school the day before the school dance where everything went so very wrong. We learn more about the history of this world, of Iris, of Zhao, and of the first appearance of the occupants. But more importantly, we learn about the disease that the occupants brought with them, and the terrifying effects, primarily the excretion of the body's fluids as tears, weeping until the moment they die. As you gather clues and track down Zhao's hiding places, you'll be transported to surreal environments to complete fairly simple platforming challenges by zipping around between anchor points until you reach your destination. These aren't particularly challenging, it's just a matter of finding the nearest spot you can zip to and off you go. However, they do serve as a welcome change of pace from the usual walk and talk sections. After completing all of these sections, we can finally enter the hall to participate in the dance, but instead, thanks to the meddling of an intruder in the communion, find ourselves transported to the events immediately after the dance, chasing Zhao through the deserted city streets at night. These events provide clear hints that Iris isn't the perfect All-Mother she's praised to be back at the garden, as clearly something happened between her and Xiao. What specifically happened, we'll never know, as this incident is treated much like the infamous noodle incident from Calvin and Hobbes, something that was clearly traumatic or embarrassing, but is an event that is ultimately left up to the audience to decide what it was. Through these events, we also learned that the relationship between Iris and Xiao was unhealthy at best. Xiao had recently moved countries and joined the same school as Iris and looks up to her as a role model, going so far as to emulate her through her appearance and behaviour. Iris, clearly uncomfortable with this, tends to treat Xiao with contempt, creating a clearly one-sided friendship dynamic. After chasing Xiao through the streets, she runs into an occupant, and I love this moment, as throughout this scene, everything has been shown through frozen moments in time, and this provides an opportunity for the occupants to display their terrifying power by being able to move when nothing else can. We awaken in hospital and have a brief conversation with Xiao, who confirms that although we were in the same time and place, Iris is unaffected by the disease and has some sort of special immunity. It's also here that we find the first plot twist. The intruder is Fixer. She has learned things about the All-Mother and is using this communion as a way to secretly share information with us. Unfortunately, they have a disagreement of beliefs, and after exiting the memory back to the dance hall and passing through an incredibly surreal scene of floating bodies and finding the principal, we confess what we found in the depths of the communion to her. This kicks off the main plot, beginning with the execution of Fixer, incinerated for her sins and her crimes of plotting against the All-Mother. From the beginning to here is about an hour and a half of playtime, and it ended up taking me roughly 13 hours to finish the game. That first section will likely be enough of an experience to decide if you're going to see the full game through or not, but here's what I will say if you're still on the fence. If the surface level details that I've shared with you have piqued your curiosity, then it's well worth your time to dive into 1000 Times Resist. Throughout the course of the game, you'll explore more of Iris's memories, see her spend time with her family in their apartment, learn about her decision to try and save humanity by being experimented on to find a cure to the disease, and the events that led up to a society of Iris clones living underground. You'll also move from past events into the future, shaping what becomes of the sisters, the occupants, and Earth itself. Just be prepared for a story that is both joyful and uncomfortable, sometimes confronting, often familiar, and never boring. 1000 Times Resist isn't a technically impressive game, but it has an incredibly impressive narrative that manages to deliver plot twist after plot twist and somehow stick the landing every time. The world feels believable, characters interact in consistent ways, and many go through character arcs and growth over the course of the story. Friends become enemies, enemies become friends, truths are revealed only to be later revealed to also be lies, and all the time you're wondering what your role will be in the events as they unfold. I firmly believe that 1000 Times Resist as a story would not work as well as it does in any other medium. Perhaps it could have been a book, a comic, a movie, a TV show, or a stage play. However, the interactivity that comes from the core mechanics of the game creates a certain feeling that's hard to describe. It makes you feel more connected to the characters, more responsible for the events as they unfold. I feel that simply pressing a button and having it result in witnessing something impactful makes you as the player feel more involved in the story than simply watching it play out on a screen. In fact, it removes the screen between yourself and the character, so when later in the story there are narrative rug pull events, they feel all the more meaningful to be participating in. Actually, I think that's the key differentiator. From a story perspective, you're not a viewer, you're a participant. And that makes the punchy moments hit all the harder, but you won't mind because you enjoy the pain. My biggest complaint with the game, other than the fact that I managed to fall out of the world in a pretty plot-important playable cutscene moment, is that it saves all of the ending-defining decisions for the end of the game. Don't get me wrong, the people you talk to and the information you learn will help you make decisions in that moment, but I can't help but wish that there were more impactful decisions during the journey to the destination. But these are minor gripes in the light of an experience that held my attention, no, demanded it from start to finish. It has its high and low points, of course, but when the highs are this high, the lows are still fantastic. This is honestly one of the best narrative-focused games that I think I've played, and it might be some time to come before it's knocked off its podium. That doesn't change the fact that if you don't like games that are 90% story and 10% gameplay, then you probably won't enjoy 1000 Times Resist. But if you're on the fence about it, I'd recommend giving it a shot wholeheartedly. It's pretty reasonably priced at just under $30 dues. However, I do wish they'd offer a demo that provides the first chapter of the game. I think that would entice and hook a lot more people. Unfortunately, the reality is that I can't say or show much more without spoiling things. During my 13-hour playthrough, the game touched on a myriad of themes, some of which hit close to home, like COVID, conflict with parents, and feeling isolated in a strange yet familiar country, and many more that had a lasting effect on me. They are often relatable, sometimes confronting or shocking, and always delivered with tact. There's a commentary on society, statements about authority, and reflections on the world we live in. It's a story that remains and remains and remains. And that's why my final rating is Moodle Soup out of 10. It's familiar yet unique, crafted with love. It can be a bit uncomfortably spicy at times, and it's an acquired taste that's not appreciated by everyone. But it's worth giving it a go if it sounds enticing. Welcome to the end of the video. As always, thank you to all the Crusaders and Templar Knights for supporting the channel, especially our noble knights Azazel, Dados, Kartoffeljäger3, Negi Malevolent, Chev_, and the Crabs. And an extra special thank you to our 3 Knights of the Holy Grail, Chats with Fyuk, Freaky Feline, and Matey8. If you'd like to support the channel, check out the membership options below, or just remember to like and subscribe, that helps too. That's all for now, so if you've made it this far, here's a sneak peek of the next game. And until next time, take care.